Welcome to another episode of Cadence Fishing TV. I'm fishing today at Meadowlands near Coventry, and we're fishing with a method feeder around about 60 metres out. As you can see, it's a bit of a wild day and I've been fishing for about half an hour, and this was my first bite. Well, that wind really is bitterly cold. It's cutting through me. And method feeder fishing on lakes isn't a method I do that much now. I did it quite a bit in the past. And because the rivers are up and flooded, we thought we'd come and give this prolific fishery a go. And it is a method that I really enjoy because you're targeting some big fish. And this feels like a good carp, so it makes a really pleasant change. I'm taking my time because we really weren't sure how it was going to fish today, and I want to make sure I get this one in the net. You can see the rod I'm using. This is the 13-foot CR10 number 3 feeder. It's bending beautifully while I'm fighting this carp. That's a beautiful carp. Whoa! What a beautiful common. Look at that, Monty. Well, I decided to bring the fish just up onto the grass to show you. It's absolutely beautiful common. I'm not so used to guessing the weight of carp, but I'm guessing that's got to be 8 to 10 pounds. It gave me a really good fight even in these cold conditions, so what a wonderful start. Well, I'd had a couple of casts with some popped up bread as a hook bait, and on the second cast I did actually have a line bite, and I switched over to a yellow wafter as a hook bait, and that resulted in that fish, so I think that was a good change. I'm fishing peg 43 on Lambsdown Lake here at Meadowlands, and basically I had a quick call this morning with Wayne at Lane's Tackle Shop, and Wayne runs matches here, and actually we were fishing here yesterday, and he suggested we try anywhere really in the 40s. I really quizzed Wayne as to what he thought the best tactics would be, and anyway, it's proved to be a good start, so thanks for all your advice, Wayne. Let's get out again and try another one of those yellow wafters popped up. Well, I know from Wayne that this end of the lake's a bit deeper, and perhaps that's helping attract the fish when the temperature's as cold as this. And as Wayne said, these pegs have been very, very consistent throughout the winter, so it always pays to listen to local advice, and particularly on a hard day like this, you want to be fairly confident that you're at least fishing where there are some fish to be caught. And the wind is really, really strong, but it is blowing down into this side of the lake as well. So that might be a good factor today, as obviously fish will often follow the wind. It seems like I'm fishing in about 10 to 12 feet of water out there, and I'm fishing 60 turns of my reel. And again, that was what Wayne recommended. So I've clipped up, and I'm trying to cast as accurately as I can by lining up to a marker on the far bank. It seems like a long way to cast, and you got to wonder why would you start casting so far, particularly when I'm pretty much pleasure fishing on my own here today. But it is clear, and it's clear from the matches when all the pegs are in. There's areas where the fish seem to be holding, and for whatever reason that area out there in the main basin of the lake seems to be where a lot of the big carp are at the moment, so that's why we're going a fairly long chuck. Well, because of the wind and the distance I'm casting, I've gone for a small 45 gram cobra feeder, which is probably a bit heavier than what I'd like to be using, but due to the wind I really need that little bit of extra weight to help me keep the accuracy. And that's also why I've selected the 13-foot number 3 feeder rod, because it's a fantastic rod when you want to cast longer distances. It's got the power to enable you to cast, well, 60 meters, but even further, up to 70 meters, no problem at all with a method feeder. And as we saw when we were playing that first carp, it's got an absolutely beautiful action as well, so it's very progressive but powerful. And that's a really key feature. You need a rod that's going to be able to do the job when you're fishing at fairly long range like we are today. Well, I've just had 3 casts without a fish, and I've been dropping the feeder in the same spot, trying different hook baits, and actually I just switched over to a pink wafter, and this had only really been in for a couple of minutes and I'm into another nice carp. It seems like ages since the last one because I'm leaving the method out for about 20 minutes, so it's actually an hour now before I had that first fish. But it's often the way in the winter. You've got to be prepared to sit and wait and be patient. This feels like another great fish. So we talked about the progressive action of this 13-foot number 3, and I think that illustrates it really well. The rod's bending right through the middle section into the butt, and that's what you want. You want a rod that will keep bending like that because it'll absorb all the lunges from the fish as you're playing them, and it's also a fantastic action for casting as well. You can utilize the tremendous power and progressive action when you're launching feeders out like we are today in this really strong wind. It's amazing that just a change of colour like that can bring a fish. Who knows, maybe it would have taken the yellow one as well, but it's definitely worth experimenting with different hook baits, different colours. Wayne had explained that this winter the lake's been more coloured than previous winters, probably due to all the rain that we've been having. And they're catching more of the carp near the bottom, so just popped up slightly or on the bottom. When it's clearer in the winter, you can pop the bait up, particularly bread, way off the bottom and catch the carp. He's not quite ready yet. It's another nice fish. Ah, there we go. Another beauty. This time it's a mirror. You've got to be pleased with that on a cold winter's day like this. Another lump of a carp. Perhaps about £8 that one. It's got beautiful scales down its lateral line. Not sure if you can see, but when I was unhooking it, I noticed it had got some leeches or parasites in its mouth. So it's obviously feeding on the bottom and not really probably that active. Well, took a fancy to that pink wafter anyway. Let's get him in the net. Well, that had been out for exactly 20 minutes and I was just going to reel in. I was just preparing another method feeder and I was going to try bread, but the tip went round and I've got another carp. So it's fair to say it's not the most active type of fishing, this, but I'm really enjoying it. The carp are fighting so well and it's just something that I haven't done for a while, so I'm not sure if this one's as big. It's like all of them really, they tend to fight hardest when they get close to the bank. I'm just trying to keep the pressure on and keep everything as smooth as possible. The reel I'm using today is the CS8 4000 and it's I wouldn't use this reel for really long range. I think you need a bigger reel like a 5000 size, but for me up to 70 meters I'm happy using this reel and definitely benefit from the smooth power that it's got. And here we are. I'll just start to bring this one up and get a look at it, see what size it is. Oh, it's not a bad one. Another mirror. Going to try and show you if I can hold him gently. You can see the hook just in the corner of its mouth, hooked perfectly, and the short hook length that I'm fishing on the method feeder. We'll have a look at the rigs in a bit more detail in a minute, but Let's see if I can hold that one up for you. Maybe it's a bit smaller, that one. Perhaps 6 or 7 pounds. Another beautiful fish. That's definitely warmed me up. Well, it couldn't really be any simpler. I've just got a good strong snap swivel tied onto my main line, which is 6 pound Daiwa sensor. And obviously while I'm waiting for a bite, I can be preparing different method feeders with different baits. And I'm going to give the bread another go. So I've actually got 6 discs there on the hair rig. All right. So as you can see, that feeder landed really nicely. It hit the clip and I feathered it in to the water by just gently lowering my rod once I'd hit the clip. And I'm not doing anything with the rod. I'm just letting the line sink, engaging the bail arm and just putting everything down on the rod rest. Basically, I don't want to move the feeder away from where it's landed. I want that feeder to land very accurately and nicely on the bottom, and then I just want my tip to just keep it as tight as possible line with the feeder without pulling the feeder away back towards me. And with time that line will sink and my tip will just come back a bit straighter into a perfect position. When it's windy like this, you do really need to force the cast to ensure that the feeder flies straight to the point where you want to cast it. And these heavier Cobra feeders, I think they're 40 gram or 45 gram, are absolutely perfect with this brass stem as well. They seem to cast really well when it's windy like this. So you can see I've got this 35 gram Cobra set up with a pink boilie, and all the Cobras have got this inline elastication, which is absolutely brilliant. It absorbs a lot of the kicks and knocks as you're playing the fish, and it's obviously very, very neat and doesn't tangle. I think we'll give a boilie a go next. I haven't tried one yet. So these are the boilies I've got, 8 and 10 mil ringers, and the great thing with these is you get loads of different colours as well, so you can experiment with those. And what we've been catching on so far is these 10 mil Bandam ringers wafters. So far I've caught 2 on a yellow and 1 on a pink. And obviously being semi-buoyant, these will pop up off the bottom. Well, last cast I had a small skimmer which had taken one of the wafters, and it just goes to show again, I've got this fish now and I think the feeder had been out for about 15 minutes, so I know from talking to some of my friends, including Wayne, that they now use stopwatches to sort of really closely time how long they're leaving the feeder out, and they've told me that there's on certain days there's almost like a pattern that you're almost waiting for a bite, but you might be waiting 20 minutes for it. So it's kind of a amazing sort of situation really, particularly when for me to compare it against how I fish typically when I'm float fishing on a river. You know, it's a very, very active method. This is a much more patient way of fishing. I think I'm almost having to stop myself from reeling in. I want to keep trying changing to different baits and trying different feeders, but I'm having to stop myself and really leave it out there, and it's definitely proving to be the right tactic today. This one's having a real go. Came in no problem, but as soon as I've got it within about 8 meters of the bank, it's really having a go. It's fighting up and down the margins, and today I'm deciding to back wind rather than use the clutch. Normally I use the clutch, but I've got to be honest, I don't do a lot of carp fishing now, and it's just amazing how hard they're fighting. When you consider how cold the water is, the margins and part of the bay were frozen this morning, so it's only got to be just above freezing, the water temperature. And it's just starting to tire now, but it's another nice sized carp. Brilliant! Well, that's number 4. And Chappie had set me a target of catching 4 carp today, so we've realised the target, and hopefully we might even catch a few more. I don't think that one's, well, it's not any bigger, he just got some serious attitude, that one. Well, the wind's really blowing hard, and as you can see, it's a strong side wind from left to right. So I just thought I'd quickly explain a bit about how I'm casting. I've actually got a marker on the far bank that I'm aiming at, and I'm aiming to punch and force the feeder as hard as I can out to that. But naturally, with the wind, there's some drift, so I'm actually dropping the feeder slightly downwind of where I'm aiming. But it takes a bit of practice, but by doing that, I'm ensuring that I'm getting the feeder in the same spot every time. So one thing to say when you're casting longer distances is you really need to flex and compress the blank, and you're doing that by both pulling on the handle and pushing. So maybe you'll be able to see that. So the feeder is just dropped absolutely bang in position, and it's obviously drifted slightly to the right. And as I mentioned before, I'm not moving the feeder at all. That feeder's on the bottom now. I'm just very gradually tightening up to it, and I'm dropping my rod on the rest, and the rest is on a very, very shallow angle towards where I'm casting. Obviously, if I put my rod rest more at a right angle, I'd be moving the feeder away from where I've just placed it with the cast. The 13-foot number 3 feeder rod's supplied with 3 tips. You've got 1.5 ounce, 2 ounce and 3 ounce carbon tip, and they're absolutely perfect for fishing long range method feeder like we are today. I've actually selected the 1.5 ounce tip, which is great. I don't need it for any sensitivity really, but it's just helping to see any line bites and knocks. The bites I'm getting are obviously very positive, because that's the great advantage of fishing with a method feeder. The fish are hooking themselves. There's no need to be striking at any knocks or taps. Right, I'm going to show you how I prepare the pellet feed that we're using today on the method. Obviously you can use ground bait or pellets on the method, and the reason I'm going with pellets today is I want to target the bigger carp. Maybe if the fishing was harder and I wanted a mixed bag of skimmers, bream and carp, I'd perhaps consider using a ground bait. But this pellet, hopefully, as it's proven, is attracting the bigger carp. Now I'm just using the fishery pellets, the micro pellets that you buy from the fishery. And what I did was, at the start when I was setting up, I just got my pellets, completely submerged them in water and left them for around about half an hour. Then I drained the water off, put them on a riddle and left them for about 5 minutes to let all the excess water drain off. And what you notice is obviously the pellet expands in size from its original state. And then, because I'm fishing the method and I'm fishing long range, I needed to add a binder to those pellets. In this case I used PV1 binder, and I really just sprinkled it on. Obviously the pellets were still damp, and just got it to a consistency where the pellets are going to mould nice and easily onto the feeder. But the great thing with that is they'll also break up nicely as well. So it's worth spending some time getting that right. So you can see here I've got one initial layer of pellets on the method, and all I've been doing is just been incorporating my hook bait into that, and then just finishing off with another layer over the top. Now you'll notice that I'm moulding this by hand. Sometimes I'll use a mould as well, but I've got plenty of time today between bites, so I can really take the time to get the method absolutely perfect. So for both my wafters and boilies, I'm putting the bait inside the feeder. On the bread, I'm just leaving that dangling down below, because obviously if I tried to incorporate that into the pellets, I'd probably break the bread up, and we wouldn't be fishing with any hook bait. So the actual hooks I'm using are these Guru QM1s, and as you can see they're pre-tied, and they're tied on a 0.19mm hook length, which is, they're saying, around about £7 breaking strain, and they're only 4 inches. So it just goes back to that point that I made earlier about the fact that with a method feeder you're using a short hook length, and you're relying on the bolt effect of the fish taking the bait and hooking itself against the weight of the feeder. Something that's worth mentioning quickly, I'm actually using different types of hairs for the different baits I've got. I'm using the bayonet for the boilie, so I'm spiking the boilie on with that bayonet. On the wafters I'm using a band, and the thinking there is the bayonets have got some weight in them, and they'll actually restrict the wafter from popping up. So I want to use a band because it's a lot lighter, and that's a great way of presenting that. So you can almost imagine the feeder's on the bottom and that wafter is popped up off the bottom, and that's such a visible bait that the carp can home in on and hopefully take. And then on the bread, which surprisingly hasn't worked today. I started on the bread and I was hoping to catch some fish on it. I've tried it a couple of times, but it hasn't worked. On another day, the bread can be absolutely devastating. I've got the 6 discs there of 6mm bread, and I'm using the quick stop style to keep that in place. So that's 3 different types of hair rig that I'm using today. And it feels like another nice fish. I've actually changed to a white wafter on that one. I just don't know, I've gone probably a good hour again with nothing, so I think we might make this the last fish if I get it. Well, what a beautiful common and a great fish to end the session on. It's in immaculate condition and gave me a great fight. What brilliant fun. I've really enjoyed carp fishing today. Makes me think I should do a bit more of it in the near future. Well, Chappie the cameraman set me a target of 4 carp today, and when I got here this morning it was looking like that was a tough challenge. But Meadowlands has proved what a fantastic venue it is. Despite the cold conditions, we've caught 5 beautiful carp on the method feeder. Thanks to Wayne at Lanes for his advice, and thanks for watching.